Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to see everyone joining us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. We continue its operation today. My name is Kola Atamanova. Today is day 600 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian occupiers. Now we will be talking about the results of parliamentary elections in Poland. Joining us online is Yurii Banakhevich, Ukrinform, Ukrainian National News Agency correspondent in Warsaw. Good afternoon, Mr. Yurii. Good afternoon, Mr. Yurii. So, the first question, what is going on with the calculation of the ballots? What can you say about the disposition of forces for the time being? Now, around 40% of the ballots are calculated, and the main trends are the same as yesterday. Yaroslav Kaczynski's party, Pravica Objednana, outpaces all of the other parties. I think they have around 37%, and Donald Tusk's political force has 27% for the time being. However, I think that the numbers will change shortly in favor of the opposition forces, because basically, traditionally, it is so that in the big cities, the people vote after lunch in some of the ballot stations, but in some spots, some election sites, over there the elections were going on until the 3 o'clock in the night, and obviously they were not able to calculate all the ballots because the people showed up in very big numbers to the election sites. Mr. Yurii, there is a lot of analytics from our colleagues journalists on the internet, and some analytics say that mostly the representatives of the big cities, including the capital, voted in favor of the opposition forces. Can you confirm it, and why specifically such distribution of votes? Yes, that's correct. It's no secret that the voters of the Civic Coalition, New Left, Third Way, and the opposition forces are the voters who reside in the biggest cities of the country, in the capitals of voivodствos, the regions. And the heads of the parties, they wanted to mobilize the biggest number possible of the voters from those regions. Basically, they made it because, according to the details that we have now, in some cities, for example, in Krakow, 70, almost 80% of the voters have shown up to the election sites, which is a very good result, because the highest this indicator was 62% in year 1989. So currently it significantly exceeds this number. A lot of voters were coming to the election sites, thanks to whom the opposition parties got such an extensive support. And here we're talking not about Civic Coalition only, which according to the exit polls got their maximum, and the social surveys were predicting way lower percentage for them. Third Way can consider their results a huge success, because the social surveys were predicting for them to hardly overcome the election barrier at the level of 8%. However, they got 12%, which is a very good result. Also, New Left can be happy. They got 9% for the time being, maybe even more. We don't have the final results so far, but all those parties in unison are saying that it's their victory. They will be forming a coalition. No other thoughts in this regard. So I think this coalition process that is already about to start now, and Andrzej Duda, the president, will give the winning party the opportunity to create the coalition. The party which has got the most votes, I think that will be the Kaczynski's party. However, if they don't make it, the second right will be received by the left-centrist coalition. Also, in our mass media, there are such a happy sentiment about the creation of coalition by the opposition forces, but we have to understand that probably the right to form the coalition will be given to the ruling party. Is there any chance they unite with someone else so they can engage the number of votes that they're still missing? In my opinion, the ruling party, obviously after the announcement of the exit polls, they were saying they will do everything to agree with the other parties which have overcome the election barrier so they can create a coalition. But for the time being, we have to probably wait for the final numbers to understand which party gets the biggest percentage and what will be the number of deputy mandates respectively. After that, understanding who has which cards on hand, we will be able to say who will be talking with whom about creation of coalition. However, in my opinion, I don't see any possibility when the parties agree to a coalition with the new right. I think that will be a nationalistic confederation, like with the party of Yaroslav Kaczynski. However, the exit polls say that they got very low percentage of support, like 6 or 7%, which would give them maybe 10, maybe up to 15 deputies mandates, which would be insufficient even if they join forces, and it will be still insufficient to get 231 mandates. But the Confederation says that under no circumstances they will enter in coalition with Law and Justice, just like with the New Left. So they wanted to get the most mandates possible in the same and do not allow creation of any coalition that would result in premature elections. However, at this very moment, summarizing the situation, Law and Justice, the Kaczynski's party, they have very difficult situation. The chances to create the coalition are very low, are at their minimum. And given the high presence of voters in the big cities, it demonstrated certain tiredness of the cadence of this political force, 8 years by now, and they demonstrated that they need some reset of the situation. But politics is the art of the impossible, so we should wait for the final results of the calculation of ballots, and we'll see how the main political actors will act. Well, Mr. Yurii, I would like to ask you I would like to look at the elections through the prism of a Ukrainian. So what is awaiting for us should the opposition forces come to power? And another question about the Confederation that you've mentioned. Everybody knows that it's probably the party that is very prominent for their anti-Ukrainian slogans, anti-Ukrainian statements. So is it somehow related to such a low level of support? Well, talking about the possible victory of leftist central coalition, the situation is a little bit different from Slovakia, where it was either democratic or, so to say, pro-Ukrainian forces were going to win, or the coalition with more pro-Russian sentiment. So it's not about creation of coalition by hypothetically existing authority, or whether it will be created by opposition. In fact, both of those forces support Ukraine in our fight against Russian aggression, and they favor Ukrainian European integration. But talking about the leftist centrist coalition, if they create the coalition, they will be trying to probably to smoothen those sharp angles that emerged in the relations between Ukraine and Poland during the elections campaign during Kiev and Warsaw. So they will be trying to solve those problems. And to balance the situation, I think here we're talking about the difficult past of the Ukrainian and Polish relations. And for Law and Justice, Yaroslav Kaczynski, it was a very sensitive topic. They were bringing up those issues, and it was very well visible. They're trying to politicize that issue and probably to hand over the solution of these difficult issues. They wanted to bring it to the level of some expert community, like historians. I think that talking about the grain crisis, it will be a little bit more complicated, because it's a profound issue. It's the protection of Polish internal market, and even the opposition forces were making statements about some some allowances for Ukraine for transit of Ukrainian grain through the territory of Poland, or they wanted to impose either restrictions or votes in order not to destabilize the agrarian market inside of the country. So this sentiment is quite strong with the opposition forces. For example, Polish Rural Party, that is a part of Third Way coalition, they were outspoken about the protection of Polish markets against Ukrainian agrarian products during the election campaign. Or, for example, Donald Tusk, he has the group of Polish farmers who were trying to break the Polish-Ukrainian border with the tractors lately, and they are quite constructive in terms of cooperation with Ukraine, or specifically in terms of export of Ukrainian products to Polish market. And here we're not only talking about the grain, it's about the broad range of Ukrainian agricultural products such as honey, fruit, and ending with rape, corn, and wheat. So this problem will be again a little bit more profound. However, I'm convinced that the coalition of opposition forces, if it comes into office, if they create a coalition, they will try to find consensus and solve this problem to renew the Polish-Ukrainian relations back to the level at least of the last year, to again to soften all those sharp angles, because it impacts Polish authority in international arena. They are now enjoy the popularity as the country who helps most to Ukraine. They have a logistic hub to help the Ukrainian refugees. Within the first month of the full-scale invasion, they were helping a lot. They were helping Ukraine a lot on the military side. So the role of Poland has grown significantly, and this deterioration of bilateral relations, it influences Warsaw in a negative way too. Polish opposition politicians understand that, and in this context, I think they will try to leave those disputable issues, those issues that can be easily removed from the agenda. However, those issues which are a little bit more complicated, like the export of Ukrainian agricultural products, well, we may find consensus as a result of negotiations. Thank you, Mr. Yurii. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrinform. I would like to ask you about the results of nationalistic Confederation. How should we evaluate them in the context of the new nationalistic idea? Is it the electoral ceiling of this party, or is it a, so to say, renaissance of nationalistic anti-Ukrainian idea for the future? How will this party act after the elections, in your opinion? Thank you. Thank you. Well, look, Nationalistic Confederation, they had their voters in Poland always. And those voters, they really come in big numbers. I think that such a low percentage of those who voted in favor of Confederation is explained by the fact that the voters of the Confederation were not so well organized. They did not come to the election sites altogether. However, the voters of other parties were better organized in terms of their presence. And I think that the percentage of people who have such views is minimal in Polish society. I think that the people who adhere to such views, the adherents of Confederation, I think that is probably less than 10% of the total voters. They played very well on those anti-Ukrainian strings during the election campaign. They were demanding to deprive those Ukrainians who came to Poland after the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And I'm reminding you, it was, according to different calculations, from 2 to 3 million, 1 million of which are still staying in Poland. I mean, those who arrived at Poland after the 24th of February 2022. So for them, I don't know why, but the panacea was to deprive Ukrainians of any social benefits. They were making statements with some numbers taken out of nowhere, as if some very significant amounts are being paid to Ukrainians from Polish budget, which is not true, because Ukrainians who came to Poland after the 24th of February 2022, I think 70% of the adults, they have found jobs in Poland already. They work, they pay taxes, they pay social allowances, and they are of benefit to Polish budget. And those benefits to the Polish budget are way higher than that aid paid from Polish budget to Ukrainians, which is not a big burden for Polish budget. So it was a populistic step, and in some cases they were trying to convince the voters with some fake news, saying that for a Ukrainian it's sufficient to come to Poland to work within 1 day to get a normal Polish pension, which myth was immediately debunked after a short calculation that was immediately debunked by the Polish themselves. Well, they were saying that the Polish taxpayers, they maintain the Ukrainians who work for 1 day only in Poland. So their rhetoric was absolutely incoherent with the real state of affairs. Nationalistic Confederation realized a lot that within certain period of the full-scale invasion, the Polish society got a little bit tired of support of Ukrainians. So it's about not only Ukrainians who come in very big numbers in the streets of the Polish cities, but also it's about the provision of humanitarian aid to Ukrainians, we see the support was waning, and the nationalistic coalition decided to use this narrative against Ukrainians. They took up this topic as an arm to try to get some political dividends from that. They've made it in part, and I think about June, July, they enjoyed an extensive support of the voters. However, a little bit later, the bigger parties have realized that there is a serious opponent growing who can take a lot of votes, and they started to launch an election campaign against the nationalistic Confederation by debunking those myths about Ukrainians. And for example, Confederation was talking a lot about the simplified taxation system. They were promising to Polish that they would not pay taxes, or they would pay some symbolic taxes. And the economists, the economy experts, they were saying that those things are fake, that those things are untrue, and such debunking in Polish information space through social media, through TikTok, through Instagram, because the voters of the Confederation are mostly the young people from 18 to 35 years old. So basically through the social networks, the people started convincing that what Confederation says is a myth, and thanks to that, they were able to stop this Confederation growth trend and, so to say, to put it within the framework within which they were existing before. And if the elections end like this for the Confederation, that will mean that they will get the same result that they were having 4 years ago, back in 2019, 7%, and the same 10 or 12 deputies mandates. That from their point of view is a failure in this elections campaign. Or may I ask you for the details? This result, about 6% according to the exit polls, will it force the Confederation to intensify their anti-Ukrainian rhetorics, or otherwise to withdraw from it? No, I think that they will maintain anti-Ukrainian rhetoric in any case, because it's one of their program slogans. So this party is openly anti-Ukrainian. We have to understand that Confederation is the union of three parties who have different approaches and visions of different things, but they are all united by negative attitude towards Ukraine, and one of them has openly pro-Russian sentiment. They don't even try to conceal it. They say, for example, that any support of Ukraine should be stopped, that they should remove the wall in Polish-Belarusian border and to bring it to the border between Poland and Ukraine. And they think that they should improve their relations with Russia, that Russia poses no political, security or military threat to Poland, and they should build a very tough policy against Ukraine, and on the other hand to make their relations with Russia warmer. So they will preserve this rhetorics. It's one of their fundamental program slogans, so I think nothing will change in this area. They will continue positioning themselves and acting the same way in the parliament. Mr. Yurii, last question about the sentiment of the people. I cannot help but asking you about that, because many correspondents who worked in Poland, they say about some political inclination of the people. Many people were walking around with different political slogans. So what were your observations? Well, this campaign was very dirty, I would say. There was a lot of verbal aggression from different political forces, which resulted in physical aggression. Some of the deputies, some of the politicians, quite famous politicians, were physically affected. There was a case about a month ago when the head of the parliamentary fraction of Civic Coalition, he was approached by a man in a shopping mall and beaten right there. So there were some cases like that. You know, the society was very heated up with this political campaign. There was a very intense polarization of the society. The politicians were playing on emotions, on negative emotions, trying to tune the voters of the law and justice against the voters of opposition forces and the other way around. So it was like that. Even those who were never interested in politics started getting interested about it. So this phenomena demonstrates to what extent the politics penetrated the life of Polish society. And I think that one of the fundamental tasks for those who will come to power after the elections will be to calm down those political emotions, you know, to reconcile the sentiment, the opinions of those opponents, because such polarization, those negative emotions, you know, fortunately they didn't result in something even worse, but the emotions are very intense, and we will have to look for some points where we have to agree. We will have to extend a hand to different other parties, to other voters, to let them understand that they are part of the Polish society too. So what do the international umpires say? Are there any violations documented during this elections campaign? For the time being, I haven't seen any reports in the mass media that would evidence about any violations of the elections legislation, given high indicators of presence of voters in the election sites. There were no violations, maybe only some minor ones, but generally they did not influence the voting process and the results, so the elections can be considered democratic and held in compliance with all the democratic legal standards. Thank you very much, Mr. Yurii. Dear colleagues, I'm reminding you, joining us was Yurii Banakhevich, the correspondent of Ukrinform, Ukrainian national news agency in Warsaw. So thank you for your interest. Thank you for staying with us, and I would like to thank our security and defense forces too. Let's continue working for our victory. Our team is putting together the schedule for tomorrow, so stay tuned. Glory to Ukraine.